My name is Mark, and this is the Path of Zen, and I am with Crystal. And Crystal was involved in a Zen organization about 10 years ago that turned out to be a cult. And Crystal is going to tell us a little bit about her experiences and what led her to come to know that the group she was in was not a good group.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Should I just dive on in and tell
Yeah,
you?
so why don't you just give a little brief history, as into what led you to this cult in the first place, and what was going on with the master and the teachers that started to indicate that there were some problems.
Okay. So what led me there was kind of serendipitous, which was part of the tricky point of how I ended up staying because it had felt like God led me there. I moved to Santa Cruz because I was going to start my master's in education at UC Santa Cruz, and I was looking for a cheap place to stay in the in-between phases. And I found the woofing program, which is it's an organic farming program where you can work. It's like a work exchange, and there's a whole database of different places. And this Zen community happened to be in the database, and it was a strange character on an online forum named Star who ended up being an insane person. But he was the one who told me about Stillpoint Zen community, and that I could stay there for cheap or free. So I came as a woofer, and I wasn't planning to stay there. It was temporary until my master's program started. And at first, it seemed like a very welcoming place. There were a lot of very strange dynamics there that should have been red flags for me, but I was not aware of them at the time because I had grown up very conditioned to accept authority in like spiritual dynamics and not to question things. Also, I had my own interest in meditation and spiritual topics, and I had read a few books, and a lot of these books talked about enlightened masters and that you meet the master when you're ready. So I had already been mentally primed for this story of.
So you felt you were set up for this by previous books and things like that.
Yeah. In my mind, it had already seemed like a normal passage when you start the spiritual path, that a master will come into your life, and when it does, then take that opportunity. And I was joining the meditations. The routine was very, very structured. Also, everyone wore blue. There was no other colors allowed. You couldn't talk during mealtime. We'd eat in silence. And everything was super, super structured. And at first I was just there as a woofer, and then Umi, who is the name of the master, he singled me out during satsang one day, and he invited me to stay. And I don't know why, I had just been like so pumped full of this feeling of like God led me here, and now I'm here, and this is a spiritual journey that I was really interested in having. I wanted to develop spiritually.
Now, was this feeling that you were full of, was that being like love bombing coming from them towards you?
Yes, yeah.
I see.
I didn't know it at the time. I was just a bit naive about love bombing and these like narcissistic tactics. I just didn't have the vocabulary yet.
Can you describe a little bit of that love bombing that happened to you?
So it was a lot of like very positive experiences with the people in general that were there. It was about a group of 12 to 15 that would come and go, and then maybe a core of 11 people that lived there full time.
Okay.
And they were very interested in me. Umi, the master himself, singling me out in satsang was like a very special thing because he was so removed from the group. Like he had.
So he was elevating you.
Yeah, elevating me up. He also had psychic abilities, and he would like respond to my experiences, or he would read my thoughts and respond to them. So I had this like magic. At the time I thought if you had these psychic abilities, you must be a trustworthy person, which is not true anymore. Like I know that's not true.
Yeah.
You can be psychic and still be a bad
So
person.
he was just good at reading people.
Yeah, and I mean, I do believe in that it's possible to, tap into these other realms, but it doesn't make you enlightened or superior in any way. And so, we do a lot of these very active, emotionally charged meditations. So I was getting a lot of I was getting a lot of opportunity to bring up some old trauma wounds and look at them.
Now, these were like guided meditations?
Yeah, a lot of them are very Osho-like, so very active dancing, some very deep breathing meditations too. These ones that kind of throw you out of your body, that they would do, just really intense breathing meditation.
So they were getting hyperventilated?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And
so they were using techniques to put you in a hyperventilated state, an altered state of mind, ecstatic dancing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this was building up to an emotional state.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so they used that.
Yeah, and I think I would say the leader kind of set it up to be this way, and then everyone else was kind of following in suit, and just kind of under the spell, it felt like.
So they were putting you in a trance.
Yeah, and there are a lot of young people like me there too, so I kind of felt like I had some peers, and that was also kind of comforting to be with people in my age group and connect with this like spiritual dialogue that I couldn't talk with a lot of people about.
Gotcha.
Oh, I'm remembering, like, one of the bigger things was they were saying things that I had intuitively already opened up to, like these inner truths that had come up in my heart. And all of a sudden I was with a group of people that were saying these same things that I had already been thinking and feeling. And it felt so, like I said, serendipitous. I was like, oh, I'm meant to be here. Here's people like me. And
gotcha.
Yes, I'm going to stay. And so I stayed.
Okay, so that's just so classic cult right there. The love bombing, the bonding, the hyperventilating, the altered states of mind. Wow. So they pulled you right in.
Oh yeah, and I was an easy target too. I was pretty naive and primed as like a Catholic upbringing where it was the same dynamic of like the priest and here's the master. It just felt very similar.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you got kind of pulled into that, and they used classic cult techniques, the love bombing, the bondings, and the praises, and you got elevated by the master. And you were put in, I guess, with the core of them. Did you live separately before that, and then moved like within the core group, or were you always within the core group?
As a wolfer, you were already in the common spaces. So like the sleeping was in a big common room, and we did have little dividers, but overall it was just a big open room. Not a lot of privacy. That was another thing. There was no privacy there. Like people would walk in on you while you were on the toilet, and if you had a problem with it, they said it was your ego that was coming up.
Okay.
So they're very good about like breaking down your privacy barriers as well. Like you were going to be seen nude, and people wouldn't, stop from interrupting that space and that time.
So there was a lot of dehumanizing going on.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, that's classic as well. The dehumanization to no privacy. There's any sense of self or any sense of identity. They just totally trash on you.
And it's easy to do with like in these like certain meditation, like Zen or Buddhism. There's a lot of text about the ego, and so they could kind of use those lessons to shame you into complying.
Oh yeah, those are classically twisted to attack anybody who has a sense of identity, to make them conform and obey.
Yeah.
All right. So you got involved in the group, and the teacher was obviously, you're in. When did things start to go kind of sideways for you there?
Well, I will say I was kind of under that spell for a long time. I was there for probably 3 years. And it wasn't until about a year into it, the master had some health problems. His name's Umi. I'm going to call him Umi.
Okay.
He wasn't a master. Umi had health problems, and he ended up dying of colon cancer almost a year into me being there. And then after he died, and the group was like clinging on to his lessons, his style. They wanted to keep everything the same and try to maintain.
Now, he was a disciple of Osho, correct?
Yep, he got his main, I would say his main stuff from Osho, and then after he left Osho, he was with a different master where he had his enlightenment, as they say, where he had his awakening. And through Osho and through this other master who was a lot more stern and like very, very strict, very mean. He was a mean person. Okay. So he had like a little flavor of both of those.
And what did we know what he did before the Osho Rajneesh thing?
Yeah, he's actually a very kind of famous person in that he worked on these Radio Caroline. It were these ships that were outside of the UK in the water that would broadcast radio, like in the 70s. There were some movies made about them, but he was like on these like this pirate radio ship and would deal with.
So he's always been a little bit. He was always a bit of a rebel.
Yeah.
So it sounds like he was a professional cult follower.
Oh yeah, he like already.
And then essentially he just was doing onto you what was done onto him.
Yeah, I could say that.
Okay, yeah, that sounds about right. So Umi, so you got involved, and Umi was, and Umi passed away after a year you were there, and you said, and I talked to you earlier, they brought in another person.
They did. Yeah, and before Umi died, he had made it very clear that he wanted things to stay the same, and that he was gonna there was still gonna be a Buddha field there, Okay. So he was like, my presence will still be here. You can still become awakened in my field, so keep it going.
So he basically put himself at the same level as the mythical, legendary Buddha.
Oh yeah, he said it all the time, that like he was creating this Buddha field, and because his students were with him, they could resonate at the same frequency and wake up.
Yeah, that's what Osho would say too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he was basically channeling Osho. Gotcha.
Could have very well been. Yeah, they're probably very deeply tied.
Yeah.
So when Umi started to die, I had been internally struggling the entire time where, my soul didn't like what was happening, but cognitively I wasn't able to really recognize it because I had been so used to ignoring the warning signs in my body like the whole time.
What kind of warning signs and what sort of things were your soul kind of going against, speaking up against?
Well, like the way it would be like constant tension and anxiety in my body. But what I had been taught through Umi was that this like tension, this anxiety was just me not surrendering to the moment, and I should continue to ignore that and just continue to push through and surrender, accept, embrace. And so I these alarm bells, like I was constantly like internally screaming basically, but I had gotten so good at ignoring it. And wait, what was the second part to that question you said?
Yeah, it was like more of the what was going on, and internally that was going on with you, and the you said that your heart was speaking, but you weren't listening.
Yeah. It was. Oh, that was what you reminded me of, is that there were certain things I didn't want to do that I thought were stupid, and like but everyone was so in this like dogmatic cult mind. Like for example, I didn't want to wear blue anymore. I thought it was a stupid practice that we all had to wear blue all the time and nothing else. And so when Umi died, I was trying to say, hey, maybe we could wear other colors, and just being met with this very strong wall of like, no, we can't change anything. And this was before the new master came in the in-between phase. Or like things like during the routine, during like no talking during meals, people would get stuck in these strange patterns of rules that just weren't really supposed to go the way that they were introduced, but it just kind of got stuck that way.
Yeah.
And so when I tried to question those rules, which I thought were stupid, that's really when I was starting to kind of break that shell a little bit and say what I really thought.
So when Umi passed away, the master, which is kind of a contradictory when somebody says, "Well, I'm the Buddha," and then they die, which because you can't, a Buddha cannot die. I can see where the whole thing starts to shatter. Now, were other members having similar thoughts as you were?
I think a lot of the younger ones were struggling, but I would say yes and no. Like some of them were holding very fast onto the what was already set, and some of the younger ones weren't really ready to acknowledge, or they weren't able to acknowledge that what we had gone through was like a cult routine, but they were really ready to change. So some of the younger people were up for change. Some of them slowly started to leave to find new places. And it ended up just being a small core of us that went with the new master.
How many was that?
It was I think it started with 4 of us, 4 or 5, and then it went down to 3 and then down to 2.
Oh.
And I was the third one. I got kicked out.
Now, so that was the new master that kicked you out.
Yeah.
So why don't you talk about that a little bit, how that went?
The whole saga. Okay, so the tricky thing was the new master, her name was Maimuna, and she came in and basically she resonated, or I resonated with her because she was coming in and destroying the old patriarchy, which was me. Like I thought this whole hierarchy was total BS, and she came in and just started tearing down Umi's old system. And so my soul was like, yeah, let's do this. This is good. And Maimuna was also very into shadow work and healing old trauma or looking at old trauma, and so she had a way about her that really attracted me, where I saw that she was kind of a more evolved version of the patriarchal, master-student relationship. So it took me a long time to see through her facade as well. Years, actually.
Now, how many years?
Well, I was with her for it's I think 2 years total, because we ended up moving from the Santa Cruz, where the Umi Center was, Stillpoint, and we followed Maimuna to a new city, also in California, and like kind of joined her group and started like a new cult in a way. And it, even though she kicked me out after about a year and a half, maybe 2 years, but even after she kicked me out and I ended up back in Germany where I had grown up, so I had nowhere to go. I had to go home. So I leave the country. I go back to Germany. I rebuild my life. Takes me 8 years to do that. And even then it's only recently, maybe when COVID started, and I could start to see through the facade of COVID, and I started to see through the facade of Maimuna as well. And
so what led to? So is it Maimuna?
Maimuna.
Is that her? That's her name. So she was not Zen. She was
like more about the sacred feminine and like these like deeper. She was very, very spiritual. She called herself enlightened. She said she had her awakening with Umi. And she was just kind of like a rebel spiritual teacher.
So it was just sort of eclectic.
Yeah.
And what led to her asking you to leave?
It was like I was slowly being pushed out of the group. It's kind of a complicated story, but it was me, the wife of Umi, and this guy who I was in a relationship with, and we were all kind of like a little circle around Maimuna. And then the wife of Umi finally left, and I don't know, she was the first to kind of get pushed out.
And why did she? Do you know why she left?
It's hard to say. I think that Maimuna wanted her to go back to her family.
Gotcha.
And I think that the wife of Umi, her name was Delphi, she was very stuck in the old ways with Umi. She was like very, very stubbornly holding on to what Umi had created.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that Maimuna was just kind of trying to get her, like, that she wasn't changing. It was time to let her go. But what with me, they just kind of, they started having meetings without me, without telling me. They would invite me to these very special circles with like Reiki masters, and they would ask if I wanted to participate, and I would say yes because I wanted to be part of the group still. I could feel that I was getting pushed out more and more.
Okay.
So I would say yes to these invitations, and then they would kind of turn it around and say, oh, actually, we don't think that you're, this is authentic for you. And they would shame me because it would be like a waste of money and time that I had said yes, kind of thing. And yeah, they had a meeting one day without me, and I wanted to go anyway. And I actually walked to the parking lot where the meeting was held, and I was like gonna go in even though I wasn't invited. And I told Maimuna this later because I chickened out and I didn't go in. And I told Maimuna this later, and she said, oh, that's very interesting. And then they, like, the next day, I think it was, she saw me on the road. She wasn't even going to tell me that she kicked me out. She basically, it was like by luck that I was on the road with my bike and I passed her. We were living in separate houses at this time. And she stopped me and said, oh, we just had a meeting. We decided that it's time for you, that you're no longer part of the group. And she wasn't going to tell me. She was going to have my ex tell me, who was like a horrible, abusive man. And she knew this. But it was just so like, it basically just tells me in the middle of nowhere on the road that I'm out. And I go home and I sell my car for a plane ticket. And I leave in like 2 days. I'm gone.
You're back in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, how did Maimuni? What was their source of income?
She worked as a hairdresser, but when she started working with Stillpoint, we were actually giving her money because Stillpoint was a nonprofit organization. Mm-hmm. And when we asked her to work with us, she asked us. We were paying her for it. Gotcha. So, like when Stillpoint dissipated, they sold the property, and they had a lot of money. And since it was a nonprofit, we had to use it somehow, like keep it legal.
So she even went to her.
Yeah, a lot of it went to her. Like okay. They bought her a new car, and I think we paid for her housing for a while. I think I'm not exactly sure, but yeah. So she was getting paid by the Stillpoint group for a while.
And Stillpoint made its money off of what, organic farming, you said?
Oh no, they were making money from donations mostly.
Mostly like, donations.
When Umi was alive, he would hold satsangs every Sunday, and people from the community would come. So outside of the sangha, people from the city would come for his satsangs. And also, like the breath work they did every weekend would get some revenue. And they would do retreats and stuff too.
Okay. And were you ever privy to the accounting?
Actually, yeah, I was involved in the accounting for a while. Just like I was just doing the books. Like It wasn't my money at all, but yeah. Okay,
so you had some credible knowledge then. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's just talk about some warning signs. What if somebody was to ask you, hey, what would be some things to look out for? Like maybe they say, hey, I'm involved in this Zen group over here, and I got kind of a weird feeling about them. What would you say to somebody now who might be questioning?
I always say that anyone who proclaims to have a line from them to God, or that they are communicating higher wisdom and that they know better than you, is total BS. So that's like my big red flag. If anybody, no matter what spiritual group, has an authority figure that says they know more than you and that they can tell you about your relationship with God, or whatever word you use. I use God, but you can use whatever word you want. That's like my biggest red flag, is just, having that person sitting on their throne above everybody.
Okay, yeah, that's one of my big red flags too. Is anybody who says that, they can divine the universe and tell you all about it, and you have to listen to them because you have all these problems, which the cult masters love to blame the students for their own faults.
Oh yeah, that happens
That's
a lot.
that is a big issue within the Zen communities, where the Roshi or the monks will blame the students for the problems,
Yeah.
and they would they wouldn't, the teachers, or even the other monks, they wouldn't necessarily come out and directly say they're enlightened, or they wouldn't directly come out and say that they are the holy Buddha themselves, but they would sort of drop a lot of hints,
Okay.
make it very there's 1,000 ways these guys and some of these girls can really imply to you that they know, that they're somehow awakened and you're not. You
Yeah.
know? And so they do a number on you, and where they get you to start questioning your own self, your own sanity, your own understandings, and they put enough pressure on you that you kind of give up and you give in to them.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happens. So
Can I say something about that?
yeah, go
So
ahead.
I had my own experiences with that, and Umi and Maimuna would do this, where they would say how their energy was so sensitive that they could feel all of the unconscious impulse and trauma that everyone else was producing. So it was this trap where they were saying that because of your unconscious stuff, I am suffering. And then I would just be sitting here like, feeling out of control and feeling like the bad guy because there was
Yep.
something in my system that I was unaware of that was
Yep.
affecting these poor people.
Yep. They threw you right into the guilt trip.
Mm-hmm.
They blamed you for their problems.
Yeah.
That is classic. When I left the Zen centers, I really did a deep dive into what cults are and how they operate, and read a book by Jay Lifton, and he outlined how the Communist Party in China used like brainwashing and cult techniques to kind of completely turn a country into communism.
Mm.
And a lot of what he wrote about the brainwashing, the struggle sessions, and a struggle session is where they just bring you in and they just sort of combat all of your notions of self and identity and free will to make you conform.
Mm-hmm.
And, they basically shame you for having any thought outside of the group. So everything he outlined was lockstep with with what was going on, at least what I saw going on in a lot of these Zen centers that I would visited, and I visited a lot. And I would say that almost all of them were cults.
Yeah.
And some of them, the teachers were overtly, hey, I'm enlightened, and what I say goes. And others, they would kind of hint, drop a lot of hints that they know, and you should listen. And if you left, if you questioned, if you thought they were full of crap, they would just say things like, well, you got too much negative karma. They blame you for it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a number, and it's sort of like during COVID, I think a lot of us woke up to some issues. Let's talk about that. So you left and you came back to Germany, and sounds like you were in Germany for how long before COVID?
10 years almost. 8
T-
years?
10 years, okay.
Time is flipping around. It might have
And
been 8 years.
now, were you in Germany for COVID, or were you in New York?
I was in Germany, but I don't live in New York. I live in Virginia.
Virginia, okay. So let's talk a little bit about what kind of, because I kind of noticed that you kind of popped up within your videos and everything recently.
Mhm.
What about COVID and the kind of the ongoing stirred you?
Well, like what you were saying about in the Communist Party, how they were brainwashing everybody to be hyper vigilant about their own selves because it's affecting everybody.
Yes.
Same thing with COVID, where they were brainwashing everybody to accept these conditions because if you don't, you're putting everyone else at danger. And how dare you? How dare you question what we're saying? And
Yes,
if you do
that's a classic struggle session right out of the playbook of communist China.
yeah, and it worked. It
Oh,
really
it worked well.
for a lot of people anyway. um I'm astonished, honestly. But I think because of my cult experience, I was when everything started, I was already like, this smells a little fishy to me. And then as it progressed, I was just like, oh, this is very clearly a setup. This is very clearly not what they say it is. And yeah, it's that it's making everybody afraid to think differently because it's become so it's been tied to people's morality. And I think most people do care about the health and wellness of others and about
Hmm.
themselves and their families. And it
Yes, we
got
do.
so tied into that questioning that became um, made you a bad person.
Yeah,
And
they shamed you. So,
yeah,
the same cult tactics that you experienced with Umi and then Mayuma,
Maimuna.
Maimuna came
Yeah.
up again.
Oh yeah, yeah. But this time I was like, I see what this
Yeah,
is.
you saw it. You had enough time between the two. It's like, hey, wait a minute, I've seen this before.
Mhm.
Bingo. And I saw the same thing too. I saw that after I left the Zen centers myself. I went into corporate America, and there's an immense amount of cult activities in corporate America, especially about the being loyal, the guilt trips for not doing your work fast enough, or not being loyal enough, or not meeting productivity quotas. You see a lot of the same kind of cult behaviors within the corporations as I saw within some of these more culty Zen groups that I had run across. Um, and then, in politics, I did get involved with libertarian politics for a while, and actually ran for the state house 2 times in Oregon. And you start to realize that the government itself is a cult. Uh, you you go with what's going on with the leadership, or you're just out. And they look at you, and it's like, why are you saying anything different? You have to be in lockstep with us.
Mhm.
So, and then when COVID came up, that also really bothered me as well, was um, the struggle session that they were throwing everybody into. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, because I'm a educator, I work with children, and I was just so angry. I still am. I'm so angry about what they're doing to the kids, and like
Hmm.
just the severe mental and social disorders that are going to come out of this with what they've been. Not every child, of course, but a lot of these children are just gonna have some really hard things facing them as they
Yeah.
age.
That's been said a lot. A lot of people are saying the same thing.
And that's why I started my YouTube channel. Is that's what I was based. That's why I wanted to speak out, because I could
Mhm.
see how I could. First of all, I could see how child trafficking is a $1 trillion industry on this planet, and a lot of very prominent people in the government, in corporate America, worldwide, are involved in child trafficking. And
Hmm.
once I saw that, I had to start speaking out about it.
Oh yeah, of course.
Um, and that's really what lights my fire.
Mhm.
Is yeah.
So, um, getting back to abusive cults and cult leaders and abusive situations. In your case, you were just sort of just pushed out because you were questioning, I guess, too much. You were not. compliant enough for them?
I don't know. I think I was compliant, but I just wasn't. I don't know why I got kicked out, but I think it was for the best, of course, in the long run. I think I was trying to be compliant, but I wasn't quite a good fit. Maybe
Has any of the past members ever contacted you?
Well, I actually did reach out to a couple of them. Once the wool got pulled from my eyes, and I was like, "Guys, what we went through was not okay." I tried to contact a couple people, and I got mixed messages. Some people like straight up blocked me and wouldn't even hear me. They were just they were still so attached to Umi.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the younger people were willing to hear me, but still really highly valued Umi and saw him as a good teacher and a good man.
Okay.
I haven't talked to any former of Stillpoint members that actually saw that Umi was not a good person. But they do think that Maimuna was not a good person. So at least I can meet them on that level.
Yeah. I had the same experience. Not one single of my past Zen associates has ever contacted me, even though I do what I do and I am pretty vocal. Not one.
Yeah.
And I ask them, and it's like, and you think about, well, why is that? And I think that even though they may no longer go to those Zen centers or participate in Zen in any way whatsoever, I think they're embarrassed. I think that they realize that they got suckered into something that was so stupid, and they feel that they should have said. I think a lot of them were embarrassed. I got a letter a year after I left the San Francisco Zen Center. I just got I got one email from a girl who had also left, who got married to one of the guys that showed up there, and then but she thought it was all good. She thought everything was, well, it was a great place. Um, so I don't know if she would still have that opinion or not. Um, but I did find it very interesting that not one single person ever contacted me, ever asked why did I not come back, or what happened, or where was I at these days. They love you when you're there, but as soon as your ass leaves the ground, you're almost like, who? What was that person? We forgot about them. Yeah, it's interesting.
I think there's a lot of I I think that when you get pulled into a cult, you usually have a lot of unprocessed trauma that you might even not be aware of. And I think a lot of the people, at least at Stillpoint, had been living there for decades, and it had been participating in this routine, this rhythm, very strict, structured lifestyle for a long, long time. And I think it's very hard to mentally accept if that wasn't, how healthy that really was.
Yeah.
People are still praying to Umi, I'm sure, who are part of that group. And
there's generally a lot of ancestor worship or guru worship. You would see that a lot of times at the Zen centers, where they would put the pictures of the departed Zen teacher, and they would bring his picture out, put it on the altar, and bow to it. I mean, it's all forming a personal relationship with a departed ancestor. It's part of that brainwashing, so to speak, when you were asked to form a relationship with somebody that could be departed or deceased or even fictional. A lot of times they also throw a picture out there or a statue, and they want you to form a relationship with that.
Yeah, they would tell us to look into the eyes of the picture, and that we could pick up their energy from that, and they kept telling us the more you resonate at the frequency of the Buddha, the more awakened you become. And it's so dangerous to me. That's another red flag, is when anyone is proclaiming themselves to be enlightened, and that I think if anyone is truly awakened, truly enlightened, they're not going to be parading themselves around telling everyone I know what's best. This is, respect and honor me because I'm awakened. Um, it's one of these like spiritual traps that are just so dangerous and so hard to get out of.
Well, yeah, the trap of spiritual materialism is huge, and it is early on. That is what most people encounter, is this materialistic version, this materialistic spirituality, to Buddha statues or pictures, or forming these attachments to feelings, forming these attachments to situations.
Mhm.
And that's all materialism. And you ask yourself, well, what is that going to do for me, or what is that going to do for any of us? Because once this human body passes away, those feelings and attachments mean nothing. So it's what's done, I feel, to create cults, to create dependencies, to create they want to give you a mental crutch, and they want you to use that crutch at all times. And then when they you feel them without that crutch, you can't be spiritual.
Yeah.
So do you describe yourself currently as spiritual? Do you have any spiritual inclinations anymore, or have you given that up?
I do. I am a pretty spiritual person, but it took me a long time to get back to that because I was really traumatized after the cult, and I really had to step back. And it took a long time for me to be even able to like meditate again, where it wasn't just like, getting PTSD basically.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a slow progress. Sorry, the dog's outside the door.
That's
If you can
okay.
hear that.
Yeah.
um, and but I have a deep connection. I call it, I personally believe everybody has their own spiritual path, and that you can't, say one is better than the other. I use the word God. I think I have a deep connection to God, and uh, the dog wants out, so it's knocking on the door. Um, and I connect to God through nature and through personal introspection. And, I've also done a lot of spiritual work with my body, because in Zen and in these other meditation techniques, they were continually having me disconnect from my body. And I noticed as I was healing that so much of my trauma was stored in my body in these emotional pockets, and I had been taught to ignore it for so long. So I do a lot of like body work and just kind of connecting to myself and trying to have a conversation with God. And
Okay. Well,
yeah.
we in Zen, we God is also what we would also call Buddha nature, or the Buddha matrix. So it's an appropriate word. It's an appropriate word to use, God, and that we would even use that in Zen in more of a, I would say, the path of Zen, or a kind of a liberated Zen, Zen without Zen cults, if there is such a thing. All right, so you're in Virginia, and you're teaching, is that?
Yeah, I work as a teacher. Right now, I'm doing more of an alternative teaching style because with everything going on, it's very hard
Everybody's
to
that way.
find. It's very hard to find a job for somebody who doesn't want to accept what they're telling everyone to accept right now. If you
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean. Um, but I have a job. Yeah, I work at outdoor education, and I've my specialties in early childhood education. But like I said, when I left Germany in the summer, I moved from Germany because things were getting really scary there with the controls. It was insane.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and at least in America, you can find pockets where it's a little more relaxed. Um, yeah, and I just work. I like working with kids and supporting their healthy development.
All right, sounds great. Well, Crystal, and we'll give you the last words for our listeners, who some of them are currently in Zen centers, or they have visited Zen centers, or they're maybe thinking about going to a Zen center. Um, any last words for them to consider, what to look for, what to watch out for?
Yeah, I would say just always pay attention to how you feel in your body, and what that means for you. So how your emotions are responding, how the tension in your body is responding, what your mind is telling you. And if you feel at any time that something's not right, or you feel uncomfortable, or just emotionally weird, like respect your body's truth and honor your own wisdom. And it doesn't matter what anyone else is telling you, how enlightened they seem. They don't know more than you what's best for you. Um,
Right.
and yeah, just don't. One thing that the cult did that was really dangerous for me is it, like, all of my energetic boundaries got torn away, and so I had no like safe space anymore for myself. And
Right.
just pay attention to that. Keep your boundaries up, and um, yeah, if there's
Yeah.
gold there for you, then use it, but don't get attached.
And which is actually interesting because Zen is all about paying attention and listening to your intuitive self.
Mhm.
But it sounds like what you went through was they destroyed your intuitive self and they told you to listen to some external person and not your intuitive self.
Yep,
So it was like anti-Zen, actually. Oh my
they
goodness.
twisted it.
They twisted it backwards and upside down.
Mm.
Wow. All right, Crystal, it was a pleasure having you on the channel, and I really hope much success for you in the future.
Thank you. Yeah, and if can I talk about the video I made, just if anyone wants
Absolutely,
to.
absolutely.
So I do have a little channel. I focus mainly on issues around children, and I do talk a little bit about my cult experience. And there was a documentary actually filmed about that cult. Um, if anyone wants to see a documentary about a cult. But if you go to, maybe I'll send you the link to that video if you could just put it in your description when you upload it. Um,
Absolutely.
and then you guys, if you want to look it up, you can track that through the video I made. That'd be great.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you too. It's always good to talk about this stuff, and it's very healing, I think, for everybody to bring these things to light. So thank you for inviting me.
Okay, well, that closes it for today. Thank you for watching the Path of Zen.
Bye.